You're listening to the Fezcast, produced on behalf of the Saracen Supporters Association and featuring the independent thoughts, rants and rambles of Saracens fans and special guests. If you'd like your opinion to be heard on the show, you can find the Fezcast on Facebook or Fezcast_SSA on Instagram and whatever Twitter is known as these days. But for now, enjoy this week's show.
You're listening to the Fezcast.
Well, welcome everybody to episode 2 of the Fezcast with me tonight on my own, but with a special guest because everybody else couldn't make it tonight. So we've called up the Rod Penney of the Fezcast world, Super Sub himself. He only ever comes on after a loss anyway. But Loxy's joined us. Good evening, Loxy. How you doing, mate?
Evening, Jez. Lovely to be back. And of course, you did have me on one occasion where Saracens didn't lose, but this is now the third time that you have.
Well, yeah, we're going to have a chat about the Premiership Cup match, and of course, we're going to talk about the World Cup as well, which has kicked off this week. So plenty to talk about. But first off, Loxy, great news coming out of the women's team with Sharifa Kasolo being called up for the Red Roses squad. And well deserved, I think.
Totally well deserved and not a great surprise, Jez, to be quite honest. If you'd asked Alex Osterbury or Mel Antio, who is the manager of Saracens Women, or anybody who spent any time watching her last year, I mean, apart from Kabea, she is probably the best back row forward in women's rugby at the moment, particularly on the open side, and actually made her debut at number 8 under some duress during the season. A player who I am attempting to sponsor at this particular stage, but they'd already put a decent value on her before the England cap, so it'll be a great pleasure, and she's a really, really nice young lady too.
Well, absolutely, yeah. And in a very competitive position in not only Saracens women, but obviously the Red Roses as well. She's really stepped up and has started to shine very brightly in that position. I mean, as I say, you're up against the likes of Mel, aren't you, and Grace and whatever at Saracens, and then England. I mean, it's just remarkable how well she's done to get where she is now.
Well, I mean, you've got her battling it out with a legend anyway, haven't you? At number 7.
Yeah, Marley.
So, I mean, when you think about it, and you mentioned Grace Moore there, and there's Grace and Poppy duking it out, and Georgia Evans around, and it just goes on and on. And the only bad thing is at international time, we're seeing less and less people.
Well, again, yeah, I mean, that is, I suppose, that is the price you pay for success. But I suppose it's a price that, when we discussed it with Alex at the SSA AGM, he was very keen to talk about the players that they've got that are internationals. It all adds to their ability to build a squad, having those internationals and credits here and whatever. I mean, yeah, fantastic. And we've got a conveyor belt, it seems, at the club, a great back row.
Well, if it hadn't have been for those international calls, we wouldn't have seen Sharifa in the first place. They've only just actually rescinded her registration to Blackheath. And people forget she's only been with us a season.
Yeah.
But because she's made such a splash, well, it speaks for itself, doesn't it?
Well, absolutely. Now, talking about youngsters, shall we say, and less experienced players, maybe. We kicked off our Premiership Cup campaign with a defeat away at Coventry. Now, there's lots of different noises been going off and on around the club and the club supporters in relation to this. Some people saying, well, it's just been treated as a warm-up, whatever. Other people are turning around and saying it's the worst thing they've ever seen from a Saracens team. There never seem, like with everything, there never seems to be like a happy medium in the middle. My personal view, Loxy, you go away to Coventry, they're a good side. Coventry are going to put out a good side against you. We discussed it on episode 1. We were looking at the players that are in training at Saracens, and you're looking at the likes of Alex Azowski still around there, Alex Goodies. There are senior players still around the club. I thought they might be included in that match day squad. They weren't. Have we treated Coventry with the proper respects that they deserved? It's something that's been questioned. I mean, how did you feel seeing the team coming out there? I mean, first things first, Callum Hunter-Hill, captain, that was something we didn't see coming from a long way away.
No, it wasn't. It was quite a tribute to Callum, really, and the respect with which he's held by the other players. But I remember seeing Jamie George making his debut in this competition as a skipper, and Northampton absolutely mullered us by over 50-odd points. So he wouldn't be, and I'm afraid Manu Vunipola actually suffered a similar fate. So this is not a great place to make your debut as a captain always. But, Callum's a good athlete, good line out forward. Very interested about those views going around the block. I'm in my sort of central mid-liberal spot as usual in many respects. But I will say that I was at the ground early. I saw the players arrive. I saw the whole of the game, and I saw the players leave. And I was soaking up the atmosphere. And I actually watched the England match in their clubhouse, so I can actually give it the viewpoint from a man who spent the whole day there, pretty much. And let's sort of go first things first, really, about the team selection. The team selection in itself, I don't consider was a major problem. The thing that struck me most, and a great number of other people who were watching it, was there was no discernible pattern to the play. Now, I've watched the Saracens for a great many years now, and in its early days, there was no discernible pattern anyway. But in recent years, since the club became successful, there was a certain stamp and style that Saracens put on a game. In this particular instance, I couldn't detect it anywhere. Now, I know with Storm games, for example, you see a much lesser version of the first team's pattern, but it's still there and you can still see it. Now, all the lads did really, Jez, and this is going to probably addressing your point about how seriously we took them. We just flung the ball around the park and continually dropped it.
Right.
The first tactical kick of the game I can remember, and I may have missed it when I was popping off an ice cream or a beer or something, was by Capelli Fifatelli, not a very good one, about 10 minutes into the second half. Now, Alan Davis did try and kick for position, but he came on relatively late in the game when things had largely gone away, and the bigger guns coming in towards the end, like the Nick Ezekways, Tom Willis, etc., made no difference by the time they arrived, because the die was pretty much cast by them. So what I saw out there, I mean, 2 fantastic tries from Ben Harris. He's a handful. He's bulked up. He looks quick. Rotimi Shegan tried. But the fact was, they kept dropping the ball, and some of the service from 9 in that game, I mean, Manu Vunipola really didn't know it was going his head or his feet a lot of the time. And I'm afraid Gareth Simpson had a game you might want to forget on that particular thing. So we were in the Championship not so very long ago, weren't we? I mean, we've no excuse to think that this wasn't going to be serious opposition, because when we had anything less than our best or better teams, we struggled in those games, and we actually lost one of them, the very first one.
Yeah,
Pirates. So there was no reason to expect, and there was 3 Worcester players, ex-Worcester, including Matt Kovacic, in this Coventry side. And Kovacic, of course, gets stuck into Saracens. But the thing is, their scrummage was better, their line-out was better. And I mean, there came a point in the second half where we had Callum Hunter-Hill and Nick Ezekwe out there, and we still couldn't hit our jumpers,
right?
Which was difficult. And here's the thing, Jez. I saw everybody arrive. Mark McCall was there. Ian Peel was there. Dan Vickers was there. Joe Shaw was there. All of the senior coach, and Adam Powell, of course, was there. All the senior coaching staff was there, and they saw it. Now, a warm-up game. It was a cup game, for heaven's sakes. I know it's not a cup that we've done particularly well in. I mean, we made a fairly summary exit from it last year, playing the young boys. Judging by the expression on Mark McCall's face afterwards, I don't think he was taking this lightly at all. I mean, we might remember certain meetings where he didn't like being pressed very hard by Bedford Blues in pre-season friendlies. I don't think he took a very good view of this particular performance. They tried their hardest out there, but even on their own line, they were trying to fling the ball across the line. It's almost like somebody said, "Don't kick the ball all afternoon." And there comes a time where you've got to earn the right to play some rugby, which Coventry patiently did. And I'm sorry to say, patently didn't. The lads took it hard. I took photographs after the game, and actually there's a few I can't lose. The lads looked devastated afterwards. It was a horrible hot day, but the fact is, Coventry just looked better organised. And worst of all, they looked better coached than us. Now, that, if anything hurt me, we were watching, it was probably that. But the fact is, that was enacted in front of the whole senior coaching team. And they were called into a circle afterwards for a chat. And I don't think this is going to be overlooked. And I think they will be expecting some improvement.
Well, absolutely. I mean, I suppose there's going to be a level. Is it ring rustiness? Is there a level of players who haven't played together? Whatever. The crux of the matter is, next game up, there has to be an improvement seen, undoubtedly so.
Well, yeah, the other thing is that we mustn't overlook, that was Coventry's third game of the season against our first. And they looked pretty coordinated. And I think by your third game, you've normally got it together a little bit.
Yeah.
They certainly felt they had a thing to prove. I mean, they had over 4,000 people in there and a load of extra revenues they deserve because they're a highly hospitable lot with a fabulous setup at that particular arena, Butts Park Arena. Fantastic. One of the best I've visited, in or outside of the Premiership. So, they deserve everything they got. But the fact was, they scored an amazing last try. Thing was, though, that was the stage where they'd already virtually won the game.
Yeah.
So we were on the wrong side of it. I don't want to be too critical of the lads, but I think it was the manner of the defeat that was more disturbing, really, than anything else. And I can't imagine that all of the big guns would have gone up there to watch it and supervise or do whatever they were doing on the day. Went up there expecting that.
No. Well, it'll be interesting to see what the reaction is coming up. And certainly, hopefully we can get to speak to somebody from the club and get their viewpoint on it at some point in the very near future, dangling a little bit of a carrot out there. I can't say too much because nothing's been confirmed yet. But, right, let's move on anyway. We'll have a small break. And then we'll discuss the small matter of this little competition happening over in France with the abominations of the national anthems and nothing else.
You're listening to the Fezcast.
Hi, Alex Osterbury here, Director of Rugby for Saracens Women. You're listening to the Saracens Fezcast.
This is the Fezcast.
You are listening to the Fezcast, which is proudly sponsored by the Saracen Supporters Association, and I'm Alison Davis, one of the SSA committee. For a £10 annual subscription, the SSA provides our members with monthly newsletters, virtual and in-person player events, away match ticket allocations, and we organise pre-match gatherings at away matches. We sponsor men's and women's players, and we support the Saracens Foundation Track Club on behalf of our members. On top of all that, every year we have a seasonal SSA badge, which is exclusive to members. Where else can you get that much value for a tenner? Join now at membermojo.co.uk/SSA, or come and see us on match day in the Oasis at the Stonex.
This is the Fezcast.
Well, welcome back to the second part and the final part. And we said it beforehand, there's a small matter of the Rugby World Cup going on over in France, just over the channel. First weekend, first round of games, a few controversies which we'll deal with first. And then we'll talk more generally about the performances by players with a Saracens link, I think, because I think there's been some really, really good performances. But yeah, the controversies. Number one, you're a musical man, Loxy. You like your singing. I like music. I can't sing, so I mean, I'm not the last person to criticise. And I think it's wonderful that they've got this choir of kids who are perhaps deprived or whatever, and they're giving them opportunity. But the French so far have seemingly managed to cock up doing the presentation at the start of things, haven't they? It's not been great, is it? I mean, how can you ruin the Italian national anthem? It is just beyond me, Loxy.
I'm afraid that's an abomination for me. It's my favourite national anthem. I mean, that national anthem, you hear that sung by every weekend Pavarotti thundering away at the top of their voices. And I mean, with all due respect to the children, the organisers have done them no favours, frankly. The Italian national anthem, the Welsh national anthem, they and so many others. I mean, bless it, God save the King's probably one of the least inspiring ones of the lot. But the fact is, those are anthems that need to be thundered out. And the other thing is, I never like the fact that they go to the players because they're probably the least best singers in the stadium usually.
Absolutely. I mean,
let the crowd sing it, you know.
Well, absolutely. Well, it was gratifying to hear when Scotland played South Africa that you could still hear the Scotsman shout about sticking up your kilt and whatever. Fair dues. I mean, they managed to keep that in there. But let's get back onto the rugby. And again, look, there's some controversies around the rugby. I mean, the big controversy, though, I think, and we'll go with the last game of the weekend, Loxy, the performance by Matt Carley and the refereeing team, Wales versus Fiji, I think was... I did say on Twitter, I made some claims on Twitter that are unfair, and that's not right. But I think those people out there who suggest that there is a conspiracy, tier 1 over tier 2, on that performance on the game, have got very good grounds. Don't you think, Loxy?
It's difficult for me to actually just agree outright with that. I don't like conspiracies. I spent a lot of time with Andrew Brace after the Saracens game, one of the Saracens games in France, and also Frankie Murphy and Joy Neville. Now, we're talking about a very, very experienced refereeing team there, aren't we? And where I'm worried, Jez, is that I think that the officials are in a situation where they are so paranoid about the laws and the room for misinterpretation for them to be sanctioned themselves afterwards, almost by reversal of decisions or whatever else. I don't think the referees and the officials are in a good place. Having said that, I do think it's justifiable for the Fijians to feel very aggrieved at their fate in this particular game. And I think Wales can deem themselves very, very fortunate. It's very difficult. I mean, Matt Carley was an alumni of Chris White, who's a referee who became head referee for a while. He was a referee I had some problems with when I used to watch him referee. He was a very, very technical referee. And he used to kill every game he refereed, but it was minute to the point of technical proficiency, really, but not much feel. And it's a funny thing with Matt Carley. I always think he kind of falls between two stools for me as a referee. But the fact is, he's out there, he's doing a job, and we'll come back to other controversies, I know. So whereas I'm unwilling to drop the axe in an extreme way, if I was a Fijian supporter or Simon Raului or anybody else, I'd be very upset. And I think you've every right to express some strong opinions. Conspiracies, not so much, I don't think.
Well, I mean, I say conspiracies. I think what I'm saying is that those who think there is a conspiracy against tier 2 teams can look at that game and offer that up as evidence. And I think the facts of the matter is that Wales got more warnings with nothing happening. to go up to the other end of the field. Fiji commit a penalty, yellow card, and then two of the players who had committed those Welsh infringements on the line that should have been in the bin. Dan Biggar and Elliot Dee should both have been in the bin, and it was Elliot Dee who scored the try. And quite frankly, it was as poor a refereeing performance as I've seen in a long while, which is a shame because I think so far the refereeing has been pretty good. Jacko Piper, France against New Zealand, was excellent. Macho Reynal, who's a person who's never had really a great relationship with England. At one point, you looked at him thinking, "Oh, thank Christ Faz isn't on the field because we know where that would have gone with him." But he dragged that back, and I think every other refereeing performance has been absolutely top notch, other than TMOs and people jumping in, which I think has been an issue.
I think if we remove the word conspiracy, which is a quite sort of inflammatory one out of it, I do wonder whether there's some sort of unconscious leaning towards the tier one side over the tier two. I wouldn't. I mean, that would be an entirely human, albeit regrettable. And I wonder about that because Wales definitely did get the rub of the green, didn't they?
So the other thing, of course, about that Wales game is, and I'll do this very briefly because I don't think we need to go into it too much, but I do think Wales, I just didn't like the way they set themselves out there. I mean, Gatland has worked out that they've not got the skills to beat teams, which is a shame because they've got some really talented players, but they just went out there. I thought, Biggar, I don't like the bloke, I really don't. And I know Debbie Knight's called me out for having a go at Biggar in the same way a lot of people have a go at Owen Farrell. But I've never seen Owen Farrell. I mean, I've seen him be fierce with his teammates, but I've never seen him swear and holler and do that to his teammates. But, it was just the niggly things that Wales did. It culminated, I think, Liam Williams jumping on Radrada's back. Quite honestly, if he'd done it to me, I'd have lamped him. And, and I'm not saying that Gareth Davis went down and play acted, but the more cynical amongst us will look at that and think, well, what's going on here? Because that wasn't worthy of his reaction, I don't think. I mean, I just didn't like seeing what they did, Loxy.
And some of the online commentary is sympathetic to your views. I won't single Dan Biggar on. I don't think that's going to be one of his finest hours, frankly, looking back on it. And he's better than that. He certainly should be better than that in this particular stage. And that approach is only going to get him so far.
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. And yeah, it was a great game of rugby, potentially because of everything that went on, all the controversies and everything. It did leave a little bit of which, funny enough, because it would have been a sort of game that I'd have enjoyed playing in myself. But I mean, if you're a neutral looking at that game and seeing what went on, but the big controversy obviously is head hits. Now, first up, Loxy, Tom Curry is a red card. Okay, I'm going to say that. And the reason I say that is because everybody's saying it was an accident and everything like that. What you need to do is have a look at Elliot Daly, who had a similar starting position to Tom Curry, who got to the situation at about the same time as Tom Curry and had a similar time in which to react. And what Elliot did was use the top inch and a half of his brain, of his head, what Clive Woodward always used to call the most important muscle on a rugby player. Saw what was happening, anticipated what was happening, slowed, waited, and then dipped and hit a proper legal tackle. Tom Curry, first 2 minutes, look, it happens. The adrenaline's going. He wanted to impose himself upon his opposite numbers. He wanted to prove he was back from injury, all of these different factors. But he went in and he was a bit reckless and there was a head contact, and that's a red card. The issue I have is the amount of other incidents we've seen. Jesse Creel, Will Rowlands, Dan Biggar, the Chilean captain, that equally, if nothing else, should have been looked at. And none of other than the Chilean one, they weren't even looked at. And, I sat at home watching the rugby with my wife, Shazza, who is a an interested observer, but not a huge rugby fan, but enjoys the big games when they're on. And her question, and likewise when I was at work today, a question from a lot of people who are not rugby nouses like we are, was saying, what's the difference, Jez? Why was that a red card and why was that not even looked at? And I couldn't really explain it, Loxy.
Not only you, I mean, going back to this conversation I had with Andrew Brace, Frankie Murphy and Joy Neville, I put the point to them because they asked my view as someone who watches the game and has played it a bit. And I said, I think the problem that all of you have got as officials, I said, you could have one incident, you could put it in front of 3 different sets of officials in 3 different settings, and you probably get 3 different decisions. And Joy Neville said, thank God someone gets it. She said, how do you think we feel? So this is my point. That misunderstanding or that lack of understanding is also prevalent amongst the very people who are trying to actually referee and officiate our games. Now, that, to me, is a problem with the laws and the lawmaking. There shouldn't be that much room for misinterpretation, and there seems to be an awful lot of it to me. And that's the reason that, you know, I look at all of these debates about the Tom Curry thing. You can make a case for about 3 different opinions on it.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, you know, the fact is, I mean, a lot of people call for a rugby incident because he's left-footed hit the ground and he was moving towards Curry and they collided and call it a rugby incident. No, I agree with you as it happens. He could have dropped his height a little bit more. If he'd gone down with the player, their heads wouldn't have collided. And it was an adrenaline movement, and, you know, and he got a fairly nasty-looking head injury himself as a result of it. You know, but at the time, in the room where I was, there was a real diversity of opinion, including from some of the Coventry players as well, who had stayed on to watch. So I watched the game in the clubhouse after the Saracens game, and they couldn't agree whether that should have been off or not. And these are guys who played a game at a good level. So, yeah. And this to me means that rugby has got itself in a mess, not of the players making, not of the officials making, and not of we the spectators making.
Well, absolutely. I mean, to add into that, Loxy, of course, is the tweet I did put up where I did one of my famous Venn diagrams, where in red, people who think that Tom Curry was a rugby incident and should never have been a red, and then in blue, people who think an accidental headshot from Owen Farrell in a mistimed tackle is worthy of a lifetime ban. And of course, the circle was completely purple, which it comes off a bit. But hey, that's life, isn't it? Look, let's move on to the good stuff and let's have a look at the performances from the weekend. And in particular, let's look at the Saracens players. And I will do it. I'll pick a team of each round. And my team of each round featured Jamie George, Maro Itoje, Nick Tompkins, Ben Earl, all from Saracens. Those guys, I mean, Ben Earl played 7 and 8 with a bit of help from Manu Tuilagi. Courtney Laws was phenomenal as well, I think. Maro Itoje was well up to his best again. Jamie George, you look at him and you'll say, there aren't many hookers who can go 70 minutes week in, week out. There are even less hookers who can go 70 minutes when your pack is down by one man. And there is only one hooker in the world, I think, who can play 70 minutes in a pack one man down at the intensity that Jamie George brought to that game. He was outstanding, I felt, Loxy.
Yeah, he was. And there was a couple of things I noticed with Jamie. As soon as Tom Curry went off, he got very, very vocal and he showed a lot of very obvious leadership out there. And he's obviously very well respected amongst the forwards and everybody else for that matter. But the other thing was that when we needed to slow it a little bit and calm it down, he was doing that too. So, yes, he was highly motivational. Yes, he was in there doing the dirty stuff and, I mean, the dirty work and not dirty play. He was in there doing the difficult jobs and doing them very well, throwing the ball in very well. But when the game needed to just sit back a little bit, yeah, he was the one who generally had the ball under his arm, making sure that it happened. And
the other thing he did as well on that side of things is I alluded to earlier, how Matteo Reynal refereeing the game, there was a point where he looked at me and thought he's going to go against England. And actually the person who got in his ear hole in the right way, who wasn't screaming and shouting, but was just asking for clarification, was dragging Reynal into the decision-making, was asking the right questions. What do you want us to do, sir? How are we doing this? Are we presenting you a picture you are enjoying seeing? Was Jamie George, and he is so good at that. You saw it years ago when we won our first European Cup for Saracens, and he came on for Shout Brits, who'd gone off for a HII injury, hadn't he? And he came on, the first thing he did was speak to the referee and got the referee on the side and said, look, it's been going wrong a bit there. What do you want us to do? And then as he's walked off, he's turned around to Shout Brits, one of the greatest players who's played the game, and said, Shout, this is what you need to do. And he was only a youngster then, a bit like Theo Danny is now coming through. And he's always had that skill. But yeah, you're right. When you want someone who's going to talk to the referee in the right way, he's your man every day of the week.
He's a leader. This is no disrespect to Courtney Laws, who I thought played a lung-bustingly brilliant game. He was very, 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 very prescient throughout the game, as was Maro Itoje. They were magnificent. But Jamie looked like the leader out there. I mean, he could end up as one of the best captains England's never had.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I will say, I think, when you look at the spine of the team, and when you look at hooker, 8, scrum half, fly half, and fullback. For England, Freddie Stewart was imperious under the high ball. That's what he does. That's what he's best at. Argentina were pretty clueless in attack, which was an amazing surprise to see. But I think that was a lot to do with the way that England played. But Jamie led from the front. Ben Earl, who really, showed the wisdom of having him as that auxiliary back who can play across all 3 positions. Alex Mitchell's speed of thought and speed of delivery at ruck time kept Argentina on the back foot straight off. And then you had George Ford, who suddenly turned around and went, I'm going to put England into the right places. And more importantly than that, when we are in positions to score, I don't care how we do it, we are going to score. And that first drop goal he put in, Loxy, set the tone for that whole game. And, that spine of England was what won them the game, wasn't it?
But of course, the spine of the team's not a cliche, it's an essential, isn't it? And you're absolutely spot on. And I don't think you're being partisan in your selection of Saracens players for the team of the week either. I think they really did that well. I'll tell you one thing that struck me, though. At the beginning of the game, Alex Mitchell, slow at the base and kicking the ball, looks a bit like Ben Youngs. As the game progressed, Alex Mitchell started to look like Alex Mitchell. And when he came on, Danny Kerr looked like Danny Kerr. Now, there are a few rustlings amongst the people watching, but I said, Danny Kerr's an experienced man. He'll know exactly what to do to close this one out. And he did know. And Dan Cole and Joe Marler really stepped up, didn't they?
Absolutely.
They're veterans. Dan Cole would have given life and death out there, and he really meant it. And that's probably one of his best games for England. It's a big stage.
And even Marcus Smith coming on, I think his defence is suspect, and it was an issue still. But he was trying, which is what you want from the player. You want to see some passion. So, yeah, he did fall off of a couple of tackles, but he put himself in there and didn't do what he normally does of making a tackle and dragging the player to the floor and then getting out there. He stood in the standoff position and he made – he might have been a roadblock, or a road hump, but he put his body on the line. And that's the one thing I think from the England performance, I think that is really important, is that the last thing we want to see as England supporters, we know England aren't going to win the World Cup. It ain't coming home, guys. But we want to see some passion and we want to see them play with an idea of what they're doing. And I could see what they wanted to do and they achieved it. Obviously, it's a headache now. What do you do when Owen Farrell's back? I think, to be fair, though, what you do with Owen Farrell is quite simple. He's not there for Japan. You go with George Ford for Japan. He's back for Chile. George Ford will have earned a week off. You play Owen Farrell at 10 for the Chile game. Get him back into it. Bit like Johnny Sexton gets a run out against Romania. That was ideal for Johnny Sexton for Ireland to get a run out against a minnow, as it were, in an 80-point win. I mean, he had a lovely time, didn't he? I don't think he would have been so happy if he'd played South Africa up first. But, that's the way it goes. So it's going to be fine, isn't it? And if you want to play George Ford and Owen Farrell, then you play Owen at 12 and Manu Tuilagi outside him. Bit unfair on Martin. I thought he had an absolutely superb game. I put him in my team of the week. It was great as an England rugby fan to see, as I say, passion. A passion with an idea of, what's the word I'm looking for? A sense of realism about how good it really was.
Well, I think the thing that's upset me most about England, until after Tom Curry left the field, is that those are really good players out there. And what I couldn't work out is how so many good players were playing so badly. Now, all of a sudden, they eventually start to play like themselves, the good players that they actually are. And it was really encouraging to see. I mean, Maritoji's had criticism, Fred Stewart's had criticism, but they came roaring back in that game. Maro didn't get into it straight away, but when it counted, he did, and they suddenly looked like themselves. So I was wondering what the hell happens to them in a game. And as I say, Alex Mitchell stopped looking like Ben Youngs, and so did Danny Kerr. Once they started looking like themselves, they looked like good players.
Absolutely. Right. Let's have a quick just run around the other teams. Scotland's, well, I mean, I'd like to say they fought manfully, but I don't think they did. I mean, South Africa never got out of third gear, did they? And didn't have to. They had a couple of bright moments. One thing that will hurt South Africa is a lack of an accurate goal kicker. But, against Scotland, you got Finn Russell. Finn Russell played a game of 5 years ago. He was petulant. He was throwing his weight around. I mean, the one he put in on Cheslin Colby and then went down as if he was injured, quite frankly, was embarrassing, I felt. He had a couple of brief moments and then he just drifted out of the game. And Scotland really suffered because of it. And if he plays another game like that, I'll be moving Blair Kinghorn up to 10 and dropping Finn Russell. But, I do have a blind spot on Finn Russell, I have to say. We've covered Wales. Ireland, it was a turkey shoot, wasn't it, at the end of the day? I mean, I got involved in a conversation with my mate Graham Smith up in Scotland. When I said George Ford for 10, he said Johnny Sexton. I said, he got 7 kicks and 2 tries. So I'd fancy getting a try against Romania behind that Irish pack, to be perfectly honest with you. And, that's it. The interesting one is, I think, France, New Zealand, halfway through the first half, I tweeted and said, bit early for the French to choke, because I think they were choking. And then suddenly they woke up. And New Zealand have got a hangover from that South Africa game at Twickenham, haven't they, Loxy?
Yeah, they have. I think the French were caught napping at the start. I think the emotion of it got to them. I don't talk about the first try, which was beautifully worked. It was that enormous gap they let the bloke run through. I mean, it was almost like they hadn't heard the first whistle. And once it took them a little while to wake up. But of course, what we know, or anybody who's travelled to France know, when a French crowd get going, it's a pretty incredible thing to sit on top of.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what is apparent is the importance to France of Jonathan Dante. And they've got through that game and they've won well. They can now slightly take their foot off the gas and, get Dante back fully fit for the quarterfinals, the knockout games. South Africa's, to say, never got out of third gear. But, that was enough to beat Scotland. Scotland really disappointed me. They really did.
Will Greenwood picked France to beat New Zealand. He's picked them for the tournament, and I don't think it's a bad shout personally. But we know which are going to be the usual suspects at the end based on current form.
Absolutely. Well, look, I really enjoyed the first week of it. Big shout out to some of the smaller nations as well. I mean, Italy played well. Namibia stuck at it, and they're tight head. That's a proper rugby man, that, isn't it? I can't remember what his name is now. What a proper rugby player. But yeah, Chile, Japan showed some great skills, some great enthusiasm. I think it's going to turn into a pretty good World Cup, isn't it? But Loxy, thank you for your time and thank you for your input and thank you for doing the Rod Penney and stepping up as our super sub tonight. That's absolutely superb of you. We'll say thank you, everybody, for listening in and joining us. We'll be back next week on the 20th of September. And hopefully we'll have an interesting conversation with somebody. Keep your eyes on the social medias for that. But in the meantime, I'll say thank you, everybody, for listening in. All the best, and we'll say ta-ra from us on the Fezcast.
Thank you.
This is the Fezcast.